about having Byron Reese on. When we were doing the Mini Trends conference, he was our first keynote speaker. So it was really exciting when Larry said, hey, who was the, wasn't there a Byron, he spoke at the Mini Trends conference. I would love to have him speak at my conference. So we were so excited that he agreed to come and be interviewed on some of his activities.
Well, thank you. I have been looking forward to it. I remember that event vividly as a riotously good time.
Well, we still have comments from people who attended it, so did a really great job. And actually, we have that recorded. If anybody's interested in that, check with me and I'll give you the link to that. Byron has been building and running software and internet companies for over 20 years. Two of them were sold, two of them went public, and one of them went into a merger. He is also, he wrote the award-winning book Infinite Progress, which is a positive outlook on technology, and everybody's got a copy of that. I have a really interesting story to tell about that. I was in Chicago at the World Futures Affairs Conference a couple of years ago, and I went to one of the sessions, and it was a huge session. It had like 200 or 300 people, and the speaker said, the best book that's ever been written about the future of technology is Infinite Progress by Byron Reese.
And that wasn't me that said it.
This speaker proceeded to hand around his book to all 300 people there.
Really?
It was amazing. I couldn't believe it. I was like, he just spoke at our conference. He just spoke at our conference.
Wow.
So anyway, I thought that was like so wonderful that the guy that actually went out of his way to really.
She hadn't told me that yet.
Yeah,
that's
I
very
wanted
interesting.
to surprise him. So anyway, very cool. He also just wrote a book on artificial intelligence that's going to be published by Simon & Schuster in November. What is the title of that, Byron?
That's a good question.
Oh, okay.
It's hard. Titles are hard, and I don't think I'm very good at it. And I think it's going to be called The Fourth Age. And the idea behind the title is that we like to think we live in a time of great change, right? Like we say these stories like, Grandma was born before the Model T and she lived to see a person walk on the moon. And so we kind of almost have a mythos about the amount of change we see. But in reality, things actually haven't changed for a very long time, probably for about 5,000 years. And in fact, if you really think about it, things for humans have only ever changed 3 times, and always because of technology. And the first time was 100,000 years ago when we got speech, which was our great technology because it lets us work together. And speech came along because of another technology called fire. With fire, you're able to cook your food for the first time, and that allows you to eat a whole lot more calories. And what humans did is we used them to grow our brains. Our brains use 20% of all of our caloric consumption. And for animals, it's like 8%. So, we went all in on brains. And that was like this first big technology that changed us. The second time things changed was also technology. That was 10,000 years ago when we got agriculture. Agriculture came at the same time we got cities, because if you think about it, you could stay in one place and you could build cities. Interestingly, that's the first time humans ever waged war. It was after agriculture, because you finally had some wealth to defend. And terribly, that's the very beginning of when you had slavery for the first time, because in a hunter-gatherer world, there was no wealth to accumulate. And then the third time things changed was just 5,000 years ago when we invented writing. It appeared all over the world all at once. And it came at the exact same time the wheel came. And with those two things, writing and the wheel, and money. With writing and the wheel, though, you had everything you needed for nation states. You could have law codes that you promulgated throughout large areas. And so the thesis of the book is that we're about to enter the fourth age. Things really are about to change. And not in a way that's like, Granny wants, things are going to change in the same way that, in a profound way, like these other 3 changes. And they're going to change because just like fire let us outsource our digestion, computers are letting us outsource our brains, and robots are letting us outsource our bodies. And so the question that should kind of come immediately to the front is that if we're getting machines to do our thinking and replace our bodies, then what are we? What does it mean to be human? And so that's what the book is ostensibly about. So, but the fourth age alone doesn't really tell you anything. It's just, so I'm still struggling with it. I have about 3 more weeks to decide.
Well, maybe you'll come back next year and tell us
I
how
would
it
love
all
to.
comes out. So another thing that you do is you publish the Gigaom, which is really cool. Just recently, you had a Gigaom change here in Austin featuring 7 transformative technologies, including artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and robotics. How did the conference go, and did you learn anything from it, and are you going to have it again in 2017?
Well, according to the attendees, it went well. I had never done one before, and so I did a lot of things wrong. I just didn't know what I was doing, and all of the logistics of how long is it, and where do you have it, and how do you, just all of it was all new for me, and so it was challenging from that regard, but we had good attendance. We had plenty of people there. People came in from all over for it, and we are going to have it again, and it will always be in Austin. It's going to be, I think, our flagship event. We're doing artificial intelligence events on the East and West Coast, but I think I want change to always be in Austin. I don't think Austin is necessarily, I want Gigaom to cover local things more, or Austin tech scene, or maybe some of the middle markets like Denver, and like you get good media coverage if you're on either coast, but I really want Gigaom to do a lot more kind of between all of that. The 7 technologies we covered were artificial intelligence and robotics and 7 technologies that were all picked because they had one thing in common. I was interested in them. And so those were the ones I wanted to have an event about. And also, I think that they're all going to be kind of nanotech and, they're all going to be bigger things. We haven't picked the ones that this year's change is going to be about. They'll just have to be somewhat different, but not completely different. Overwhelmingly, people enjoyed the AI portion of it. And I think I made a mistake because I had all the programming equal, so I gave equal time to like nanotech as I gave to AI, and that probably wasn't a good idea in retrospect. But just because people's interests. So, and we didn't have enough robots. I would have liked to have had a lot more actual robots so people could interact with them. So I think we learned a lot, and I will try to do a much better job this time.
Well, we know a lot about the challenges of having conferences, so we can certainly understand that. But they really are wonderful. We've been having this one for 12 years, and several of the people have been here every year, or from the
Wow.
first of now. Yeah, so it's amazing how conferences can really build on each other. So our audience is mainly involved with the communications industry. Of the technologies that you look at, any thoughts on, what are your thoughts on the biggest impact to this industry?
Oh, I think that would be unquestionably artificial intelligence. And I only say that, I'll say that with the qualification that, when you're a carpenter, when you have a hammer, they say every problem looks like a nail. And so I'm probably biased because I just wrote a book about artificial intelligence. That being said, it's profound in its implications because it helps machines make decisions, and businesses are just a series of decisions, right? Decisions and actions. And if this technology helps you make better decisions, then it's transformative. So in content, you can think of 100 ways to apply it, like what kind of content do we make, and who do we show it to, and to whom do we show it, and when we show it to them, what else do we show with it, and what sorts of, everything almost in the content industry is a decision. And the thing about AI is it works really well. If you think about it, the first place it worked at all really was playing chess. That's kind of in the 90s, its first big win. And the reason was because there were centuries of data on which to train it. There were all of these chess games. They were all coded the exact same way. And so you had all of this training data, and it was clean. And so you could build a system that studied that data. And the real challenges with AI are places where you don't have data, or you don't have clean data. And most of the time people spend their time with AI just working on the data portion of it. In the content world, we have lots and lots of data. And so in theory, you have enough data to train it on asking very specific questions and getting good answers. So, so I think it's a natural place. Because if you think about it, the difficulty in the content industry is that the rate of growth of content, the amount of new content that's created, is growing much faster than the number of people who are able to consume it. So, if you're talking specifically about the internet stuff, internet usage grows at this percentage. The amount of content on the internet grows at this percentage. And so what that means is that there's an ever dwindling, any one piece of content, it becomes that much harder for it to compete. That's where I think artificial intelligence really comes in, because what people want is in this moment right now, there's something that I would find very interesting to know, and I don't even necessarily know that, but in theory, that's a solvable problem based on studying data of, I don't know, people like me or so forth. So, artificial intelligence.
Cool. So I want to get back to the infinite progress and how positive it is, but first I'd like to just talk about a couple of concerns. There's been a lot of concern about jobs going away, and with a new administration, there's some concerns about that. Those problems have been highlighted. So what concerns do you have around that, about employee and jobs losing and gaining? And and if you do have your concern, what do you see as a way out?
I am one of the ones that I don't think automation and robots destroy jobs. I think that technology, it does a very simple thing. It multiplies what people are able to do. So with technology, you're able to do more. And when you can use technology, you can make more because your productivity is higher. So if you have a forklift, you can move more bricks than if you're hauling bricks on your back. And because of this, anytime you can deploy technology, it raises productivity, and that raises incomes. It's that simple. This has been going on for 250 years. You just think back to, say, 1800 and how much automation there was, very little. And you think about our standard of living at that time, very low. And every single thing that we have in our high standard of living comes from the fact we've done a bunch of automation. I don't know about you, but I doubtfully do not work harder than my great-grandparents did, and yet I live a life of more leisure and a higher standard of living than they did. And it isn't because I work harder, it's because I have technology. The idea that some people have put forth that this time is different is actually a very old argument. They said that the Great Depression was caused by too much automation, and Keynes said that. I just wrote an article about this. In 1961, there was a Time magazine article that was talking about how the new jobs that were being created were not low-skill jobs, and the low-skill jobs were all disappearing. So it's a very old argument. There's 3 or 4 or 5 reasons why this time is different. That I don't think any of them are compelling. Some people say this time is different because technology is not augmenting workers, it's replacing workers. And this is I don't think it's true. I mean, if you think it's true, then find a telegram delivery boy or a switchboard operator who is still around. I mean, those jobs were eliminated by technology. And it isn't even true. And like if you think of the cotton gin famously let one man do the work of 20. And that isn't really any different than letting 0 men do the work of 20. I mean, in both cases, it's kind of the same sort of thing. So I think that automation You know, at some level, there's some logic that goes like this. There's only so many jobs in the world, and if you take a job that a person used to do and you get a machine to do it, there's just one less job. And that isn't actually how jobs are created. Jobs are created when you take something and you add value to it. And however much value you can add in an hour is how much of a wage you can earn in an hour. So there's in essence an infinite number of jobs always. Anytime you can take something and add value to it, you have just created a job. And that's how come, if you think about it, we've had full employment in the United States for 200 years. Well, let me rephrase that. Employment in the United States has varied between 3 and 9% for 200 years, with the exception of the Depression, which was not caused by technology. And you have to think, well, why would that, I mean, and during that time, we adopted all kinds of technologies, arguably more disruptive than computers. We adopted electricity. We adopted mechanization. We replaced all animal power with machine power. And those are big deals. Those were like huge. And yet 3 to 9% all the way through all of that. And so I don't think it's, and I'll say one more, that this time is different. One theory is, well, we're eliminating all these low-skill jobs, and we're creating all of these high-skill jobs. And do you think that this person who was replaced at a fast food restaurant by a kiosk, are they going to become a geneticist? And I mean, I think the setup of that problem, which you hear a lot, is disingenuous, because that's not what happens. All that has to happen is everybody just levels up. Everybody learns just a little more technology than they know now, and everybody levels up, so that the geneticist is a college professor, the junior college professor becomes the college professor, and it just ripples down. So everybody just kind of takes up just one little step, and you maintain full employment, and you fill up these new high-skill jobs. So I'm not a believer that automation destroys jobs. That being said, if you want to make the argument that it does, I think you would have to argue the speed of change. But I don't even think that, I mean, we went in 22 years from generating 5% of our power with steam to 80% of our power with steam. We did that in 22 years, and that's a profound change. So I don't actually see any indication that this time is different.
One of the things we were talking about earlier this morning was that with, like, for example, automated cars, all the taxi cab drivers will be affected, all the truck drivers could be affected. What would you tell those guys?
Some people say that's going to swamp everything, that you have 3 point however many million of people who make their living driving, and then you have support jobs pulling them up. And I don't think, I mean, look, nobody knows, right? Nobody really knows, but that doesn't feel like that's going to happen to me, because what happens is adoption of these technologies is relatively slow. So you're going to have self-driving cars, then they have to get legally accepted, then they have to be socially accepted, then the lawyers have to get involved, and the legislation all has to be written. Then you retrofit equipment, and you gradually start replacing them. Along the way, there are drivers who are retiring, and there are people who decide, well, maybe I shouldn't be a truck driver. And so it gradually does like anything else that was once a big employer of people that is no longer. And until they make a robot that will jump out of the truck and leave an illegibly scrawled note on my front door that I wasn't there to get a package, they don't have really a solution, right? Like, you know, you have to have somebody to. So I don't know. I'm not compelled by that at all. That somehow there's this great tipping point of drivers.
Augie said that he wouldn't mind, because then he could just travel around, because most of the time they're going to have a driver there with the automatic car, so he can take a little vacation.
I tell you, I need to. We're notoriously bad at driving. I mean, we just are. or I am. I will start there, and it just kills so many people around the world that, you know, and the idea that people are going to look back and say, yeah, you used to let a 16-year-old propel 4,000 pounds of metal at 75 miles an hour down a highway, and that seemed like a rational thing. And then you think, well, no, I guess you phrase it that way, and it isn't. So I'm unconvinced with the taxi argument.
Another fear is security. It seems like the stakes just keep on getting higher and higher. And I'm talking about automated automobiles. You know, what happens if someone hacks into my automated automobile and locks me in and drives me and kidnaps me and drives me off somewhere? How do you protect against such things? And where's the point where progress is stalled because the bad guys win?
Well, that's a valid question. One thing about the internet that we discovered was that people are innately altruistic. Nobody, when we were thinking about, before the internet came about, very few people even saw it coming. You know, nobody said, what the world needs is 50 billion documents connected by hypertext, accessible by, you know, nobody had that vision. It's a technology that's not being used for what it was built for, right? I mean, it was built not for sharing cat videos. That was not the original intention. And what happened is nobody foresaw it, and even once they started to foresee it, nobody foresaw some very interesting things. That if you are going to Seattle and you're taking two kids with your two kids and you want to know something to do, you can post that to a forum, and somebody, some perfect stranger, is going to write you a big long reply. They get nothing for that. Nobody predicted Wikipedia, which not only do people labor without getting paid, they labor in anonymity without getting paid, because there's no attribution. Nobody predicted the open source movement, that there would be people who write code and just share it with other people to share it. Nobody predicted that if you know, I think about my father, he had, he sold insurance for 35 years. So he was of that generation that kind of got a corporate job and kept it. I don't know that he ever wrote anything, ever, a letter or a memo or anything after he left college. And what we found is that the minute you give people those tools, you invent something called blogs, 100 million people start one. Amazon lets you comment on products, billion people write reviews, billion reviews get written. And you make YouTube and everybody becomes a filmmaker, everybody uploads things. You make Flickr and Facebook and everybody starts taking photographs and sharing them. And it turns out, so two very interesting things about us. My father didn't write because he didn't want to write. He probably never thought about it. But my father obviously didn't write because he didn't have the tools to. Nobody made it ridiculously easy to. And people didn't not share code or share things because they didn't want to, but because there just weren't any tools to. All of it to say is that what we have found is that the vast majority of people are evidently altruistic. We know this because if you ordered something online and a package came and then you called your credit card company and said, I got a box from them, but it just had bricks in it. I want to dispute the charge. Credit card company gives you a credit for that. If any significant percentage of people did that, credit cards would cease to be accepted. And yet the thing is everybody gets the box, opens it up, they have their goods in it, and they are fine with it. And so credit cards work. And so all these, and yes, there are nefarious uses of technology. But what we have found is that in every instance that I can think of, altruistic uses vastly overwhelm the bad actors in the system.
What about the polarization on the internet? Because we have all these millions of people now, and often you get into groups of people, and there's separate facts for different people, and there's fake news and all this. How do we get past that?
I don't know. No, it's a tricky thing at a number of levels. The company I run right now is called Knowingly. I started Knowingly, and it was going to solve what I thought was the biggest problem on the internet. You don't know what to believe and what not to believe. So it was going to be a service that certified content is factually accurate. And it didn't work very well, and so I kind of changed directions. But it's a problem I'm very interested in. I'm not sure that the fact that people have access to their own facts is the big problem, in the sense that we used to all just have one local paper and 3 news channels. And so we all got the same exact information, whether it was correct or not. And now at least you have ways, like imagine, like you think of something like Snopes, right, where you can look anything up, that any crazy claim, and Snopes will have a big long piece about whether it's true or not. How would you have done that in 1985? Like how would you have stopped something that wasn't true, that just kind of spread around? You didn't really have any ways to, I mean, just think about it. I remember my uncle came to me when I was a boy and he had these new dogs and he wanted to give them Native American names, and he asked me to figure out the words in Choctaw and Cherokee for bear and alligator. That took me 8 weeks to do, because I had to do interlibrary loans and all this photocopying and all of that. So we used to be in an information desert. Like we really didn't have we weren't empowered in any way. Now you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Now you can actually track things down and figure them out on your own. The fact that not everybody does that is foreseeable, but it isn't. I think we're in better shape than we would have been in 1985. It is tricky that it used to be, it seems, that everybody agreed on a set of facts and they had different values regarding those facts. And that was what the debate was about. We all agree that this is a true thing, and I believe we should do this with that, and you believe we should do that. And it is true that now we have debates about what's true, not just what our values are regarding it. But again, I'm not sure that's not, that original set of facts that we had in 1975 may not have been any more true. I mean, we may have all had different values about incorrect facts. And so it's hard for me. Look, I get as frustrated as everyone else, but it's hard for me to look at our situation and think we're somehow worse off, that we have access to the sum total of all human knowledge in our pocket that we can get at any time. And so, in the olden days, if you wanted to know something, you had to go to an oracle, like make an epic quest to Delphi and find the oracle, and the oracle would answer your question with some cryptic answer you could interpret. Anyway, what do we have? You can type any question you want, and in a quarter of a second, Google will stack rank 50 billion pages on the internet from top to bottom on what's likely to have your answer. And like the difference between those two worlds is, it would be hard to paint it that we have somehow stepped backwards. It looks that way because we all read the news, but I think we're better off. I really do.
What had motivated you to write about infinite progress?
Well, thank you for asking that. Most of those sorts of stories are terribly boring. This one's only minorly boring. When I was part of a successful company, and that had an IPO, and I received lots of invitations to give speeches. And good speakers give the same speech over and over and over again. And I was a bad speaker. I never have given the same talk twice in my life, for a bunch of reasons. I mean, every invitation is an offer to participate in an event of a certain group of people discussing a certain thing, and I just can't bring myself to phone it in. And so what I do is, on every single time I'm asked to speak, I write something new. And after a while, I noticed there were lots of common themes, and those sure looked like chapters for a book. And that's when I put it all together and made a book. The thesis of the book is very simple. It is that everybody know what Moore's law is? So Gordon Moore, who founded Intel 51 years ago, made an observation we call Moore's law. he said the power of computers doubles every 2 years. And what he didn't know is he thought it would only last another 10 years. It's still going on today. And then this really smart man, Ray Kurzweil, came along and he said, you know, what's really interesting is Moore thought it had only been going on for a while, but it had been going on for a couple of 100 years. That even though computers went from being mechanical to tube-based, to transistor, to microprocessor. So the underlying technology changed, like going from horse to car to whatever. Even though the technology completely changed, the rule was constant. 2 years later, it doubled. 2 years later, it doubled. 2 years later, it doubled. Just, you can straight edge it. And nobody knows why this is. If you figure it out, tell me, and we will split the Nobel money, because it seems to be a really interesting fundamental law. Then other people came along and they said, all technology behaves this way. Almost all technology. It doesn't double every 2 years, but it doubles every 37 years, or it doubles every however many. There are people who claim multicellular life doubles in complexity every 237 million years. I mean, so technology seems to do this. And what's meaningful about it, like in a real sense, what it means is that while it took us 4,000 years to go from the abacus to the iPad, in 25 years, you'll have something as far ahead of the iPad as it is ahead of the abacus. It's something we can't even imagine, like it's way out there. And it's going to come very quickly. And what it means in a really profound sense is that all technical problems, all problems that are purely technical, will be solved because they all have technical solutions. And so if something is purely a technical problem, and many things aren't, many things are just, there are bad people, right? I mean, but some things are purely technical. So disease is a classic example of a technical problem. You don't have to have disease. We just haven't figured out how to end it. And what's exciting about disease in particular, so I think you will live to see the end of disease much sooner than you might expect. What's interesting about it is if you look at the worst disease there ever was, it was smallpox. Smallpox in its last 100 years killed more people than have been killed in all wars put together in all time. And yet we learned to vaccinate against smallpox. A man named Jenner made a vaccination in the 1790s. This was before Louis Pasteur was born, and Louis Pasteur is the guy that figured out germ theory. So somehow we learned how to vaccinate against the worst disease there's ever been before we even knew it was caused by germs. The second worst disease there's ever been, I think, could arguably be polio. Polio is eliminated in the Western Hemisphere. In the rest of the world, it's as uncommon as being struck by lightning. And Jonas Salk made a vaccine. Jonas Salk didn't have a computer. Jonas Salk didn't have any technology. And what do we have? We can sequence its genome, and we can model it in a computer, and we can try 10,000 cures in a second. And that's the world we're heading towards. So if you think, wow, when people had very little technology, they could do these things, disease doesn't really stand a chance. Hunger, I believe, is a technical problem. Poverty is certainly a technical problem. You don't have to have poor people in the world to have wealthy nations. And so that's what the book's about. It's trying to figure out what are technical problems and will we solve them. The most interesting one, of course, is that if you can hold on for 25 more years, and most of you look like you're going to make it, if you can hold on for 25 more years, you face the very real possibility that you will never die, because mortality could very easily just be a technical problem. You only seem to age for 4 reasons, all of which seem to be technical in nature. So. Well, I shouldn't say you will never die. You will live to, on average, 6,700 years. That is how long it will take for some weird, wily coyote pipe organ falling out of the second floor of a building and landing on you accident to befall you. So you wouldn't have a natural lifespan, but something's eventually going to happen to you.
What about being frozen? Do you think that's going to work?
I don't know.
Be interesting. We'll see.
I mean,
Ray Bradbury is still here, 3,400 years from now.
yeah.
What do people ask you about the book? Where does the interest seem to lay when you're in conversations with people?
It seems to me people, the thing about optimism is that it is the historically accurate position. things always get better. That's a hard thing to hear right now, but things always get better. And the easy way to illustrate that is that if you think of any time in the past that you want to, pick 50 years, 100, 1,000, 5,000, pick any time in the past, and then spin the globe around in your head and pick any country, any place in the world. Just put a little pin there. And then you pick any standard of progress. Pick life expectancy, infant mortality, access, self-rule, the status of women, individual liberty. You pick any kind of progress you want. And I can almost guarantee you, without exception, almost, that no matter where you picked in the past, no matter what part of the world, and by no matter what standard you picked, things are better now than they were there at that time in that way. Things get better. And they get better because of two things. They get better, I think, because of technology and because of civilization. So I think optimism as a general rule is a far easier case to make than pessimism. And yet people seem to feel guilty when they're optimistic, like they're naive or childish or something like that. And they're almost embarrassed to admit that they're very positive about the future because it seems more, I don't know, fitting with the times to be discouraged about it all. And so I think what people want to believe it. Like they want to have a reason. They have an innate intuition to be optimistic, but they want real reasons to be. And that's what most people want to talk about.
What are you most optimistic about?
What am I most optimistic about? I believe in people. I believe that we seem to be on a path. You know, we used to all be savages. 1,000 years ago. Think about just how cruel people were in times that are within 200 years past. Think about life 1,000 years ago and think about just the kind of cruelty that existed. And then realize we are no different in any way than those people. You know, had we been born then in those places, we would have been as cruel as they are. But what we have done is we've invented this thing called civilization, and we have made human rights, and we've made habeas corpus, and we've made individual liberties, and we have created all of these things that have made the world, I think, a better place. And if you think about it, all the hard work's already been done, like clawing your way. The first person who said, maybe we ought to think of the other person first, got whacked on the head with a rock probably or something. I mean, it would be hard to make that transition. And we have it kind of easy. We are civilized people who know how to, and are on a path to being more civilized. I think the way that happens is because not only are we creating a more civilized world, but the standard of living is rising, and it rises through technology. And so it used to be, back in the day, you barely had enough to feed yourself and your family, and you didn't have any resources to care about anybody else. And then over time, we have grown in prosperity. And now we have the luxury of wanting to make sure the eggs we eat came from chickens that have a good quality of life, that roam freely. And so all of a sudden we've gone to even caring about how the animals that we consume are treated. And that feels to me like a direction of a species that is becoming broader and broader to whom it extends regard and empathy to. And so I believe in human empathy. So that's what I'm optimistic about.
I'm really interested in the trend and working in the trend of happiness at work and how important it is to be engaged with your company in order to be successful and sustainable. Are you seeing signs of that trends in your work also?
I once started a website called happynews.com, and it reported positive and upbeat news. And everybody told me you can't make money off happy news, and they were right. I was like, no, this is what people really want. I still have it, by the way, but I never could kind of make it work. But I did a lot of interviews about it. It got a lot of press, and I did a lot of interviews, and everybody asks the same question, which is, what makes people happy? What makes people happy? And so I needed to have an answer to that. And so that was something I spent a fair amount of time trying to figure out. And I'll save that for next year. That's okay. No.
Maybe the timing is right now.
Okay, so what makes
knows?
people happy, it seems, is the degree to which they have control over their situation in their life. People who feel like they don't have any agency, don't call any of the shots, are typically not happy. If they're afraid of what's going on around them, if they feel like they are empowered and have some amount of control over their life, they tend to be happy. I think the trend in the workforce is for people to be empowered and have more say in what they do and how they do it. And so I think that that's kind of the underlying theme towards increased happiness at work.
Wonderful. Why don't we open it up to the audience?
Is there a difference, and what is the difference between just programming and artificial intelligence? For example, one of our companies, DirecTV, has addressable programming, and it knows where you live, and it knows what you're watching, and can decide what advertising to put in there. Well, is that artificial intelligence, or is that just clever programming? Is there a distinction?
That's a wonderful question, actually. That's a very, very good question. So as it turns out, there's no definition of artificial intelligence. There's no consensus definition. There is, interestingly, no consensus definition of what intelligence is. Nobody even agrees to that. There isn't even agreement on why we say it's artificial. Is it artificial in the sense that artificial turf looks like turf, but it really isn't? Or is it artificial in the sense that it really is intelligent? It's just been created by people. So is it something that looks intelligent or something that is intelligent? Nobody has agreement on that. But to answer your question, we used the word and the person who created the term artificial intelligence regretted it, and he for a number of reasons. But it's, Chinese checkers isn't checkers, and it's not from Chinese. Panda bears aren't bears. So we had this term artificial intelligence that nobody agrees on what it means. What it technically means is that it's programming that responds to its environment. In that sense, your sprinkler system, which has a sensor to tell when your yard is too dry and comes on, that's AI. It really is. It's responding to its environment. So it's the very lowest bar of it, but that's what AI is. And so it is just clever programming. The sense that it's being used right now is different, and the sense that everybody's excited about it again is different. And it's different because two or three reasons. One, computers have continued to get faster. Two, we have more data. We have all this data on the internet. We have all this sensor data. So we have all this data. But most interestingly, the algorithms we use to study that data have taken a big step forward. That's a huge thing. I'll come right back to that. And the fourth thing is, finally, there are tools that you can use Watson. It's something, you could spend an afternoon and you could use Watson to solve a problem. Amazon has a machine learning capability that is approachable by any programmer. You can use these resources of these giant organizations. And the techniques that we have learned how to do that have made all these great results are in machine learning. And so there are three ways to do AI. One is the classical way. That's how people used to do it, where if you wanted an AI that figured out when to plant seeds, the first way would be classical AI, where you would just say, okay, let's figure it out, let's figure the rain out, let's figure all that out, and you would do that. So that didn't work very well for some problems. The second way to do it is an expert system. That's where you just go around and ask every farmer, hey, how do you decide? And you turn that into a bunch of rules. And that got people really excited in the 90s. And it works for some things, but in any case, it works for some things. But what we have now is akin to, let's just take all the weather data, let's take all the yield data, let's take every bit of data, and just say what would have been the best time to plant in the past. And it looks at all these different variables and it weighs them all differently, and it will come up and say you should plant on, and it could be something weird like you should plant on the first Tuesday after, whatever. It could be something that you would look at it and say, what? But it works because we have multivariant neural net thingies that can weigh all the different factors and try every combination of permutation. And those are the tools that are now available to everybody to use. And that's why it is so when we say AI, it's really a very simple thing. But when you read about it today and it's doing all these wonderful things, it's because of the machine learning aspect with all the data and the new approaches that are figuring out these really good problems.
Thank you very much for the free book, and I've been trying to peruse it while you've been talking.
Well, thank you.
And I noticed it's a 2013 copyright. Given what we've just watched and the whole campaign that went with it and the results, if you had to write this book today, would you have a different perspective and what would change? I mean, I look at even like your points about the internet and how it will end ignorance.
There's one in every crowd.
I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I'm really fascinated by your thoughts here, but what do you think on if you wrote it today?
The thing that was in my mind the whole time was Nazi Germany. So every time I wrote about this, I had to think, there are still people alive who participated in the Holocaust. Like, you just have to keep that in your head the whole time. And so we're not nearly as far away from that as it would be nice to pretend we are, right? World War II is within living memory. And you had a nation of otherwise good people do incredibly awful, awful, awful things. And so I thought about that the whole time when I was writing it, like how do you, and so everything I wrote was tempered with that thought, which I still, would hold up that even at our worst, we're not back to those times. And what I would say is that the thing to keep in mind is the long arc of history is that just imagine life 30 years ago, and then imagine life 50 years ago, then imagine life 100 years ago, and how it's improved, and how more and more people are participating, and more voices are, all of it. And so it's any one election cycle. I write something about how someday artificial intelligence, how any election cycle discourages 48% of the people who no longer, think, maybe this. So every time that happens, but I think it has happened a number of times before, and I think the goal is to keep our eye on the big prize of like, where are we heading? Where will we be in 20 years, and then 50 years, and 100 years? We sure live in a galaxy that looks like there's a lot of room out there, and I long for a day when a billion planets each have a billion people on them, and every Da Vinci can paint their Mona Lisa. Everybody can live to their maximum potential. There are still parts of the world where you could have a young Marie Curie or a young Dante, and they have no schooling, and they have no opportunity, and survival is the only thing, and that's the great harm. And I think a world in which everybody can achieve what they, and then to spread that throughout the galaxy. I think that's our long view of humanity. And so elections, I don't get too. Well, I would just say that. I try to take the long view of it all.
What are your next steps? What are your next passions? You got so many things going on.
Well, I just finished this book, which I'm very proud of. I wrote it. It was incredibly hard to write, and I only wrote it at 300 words an hour, which felt so hard. And I just finished that. So I don't know. I want to write something else, but I don't know yet.
What about Gigaom? Where do you see that going?
Well, Gigaom is a research company. We do research about technology and how companies use technology, and we publish reports that might be about how do you understand the cloud, or how do you voice over IP, or we take a piece of technology, an area, and we kind of study it. We don't generally pick kind of winners and losers. We instead say these products are good in this situation, these products are good here, and this is good here. So we produce reports, 4 or 5 a month. And that's our main business, is it's helping business leaders understand and use technology. We put on events because those help us get information and for the reports and figure out what to cover. And frankly, I just enjoy them. We have an AI event coming up in San Francisco in the middle of February that we're working on right now very hard. They are a lot of work.
Some more questions?
I may have worn everybody out.
Byron, I have a quick question concerning, you mentioned the rung on AI and everybody going up one. How do you square that with the logic and the sciences, right? When you look at the professions, the engineering, the doctors, the lawyers, I mean, the highly classified folks in society, so to speak. Is that more logic-based, and is there more of a threat of those professions going away from AI instead of going up one on the rung? Being displaced by computers versus the human factor?
I
And I think that along the medical technology, right? The normal doctor that diagnoses, do you need a doctor, or with certain questions, will that be displaced quicker than some of the lower?
Well, in this book I wrote, I have a test. It's a 10-question test about any profession or any job you want to kind of figure out if AI could end it. And there are things about, would 2 people do the job exactly the same way? Would be one of the kinds of questions. Does the job require you to physically be in different locations? Would be another one. Doctors are an interesting case. And there was a recent thing that came out where Watson, they took 1,000 oncologists, and they took diagnoses of 1,000 cancer cases, and they fed it all to Watson, and Watson in 99% gave the same prognosis and treatment, and in 30% of those cases, it gave the same treatment and something else that was from one of the 250,000 medical journals that the doctors hadn't read because they just can't keep up. And so the question is that going to be a tool that doctors will use? Or I don't know that I really want to self-diagnose my own cancer. And so I think that's going to be a lot of it, is that I don't know. I mean, it's the $64,000. It's obviously a
Well, let's take that same concept a little bit further and look at the fact that we have people who don't adopt no matter how useful the technology is. And I'll throw out 3 examples. We gave actors the ability to perfect performances with cinema, yet live theater is still active, very heavily subsidized. We have self-driving cars, or we will have self-driving cars, and there'll be still people who will insist, I will drive my own car. Mm-hmm. We have technology that would allow all of us to meet virtually, where we could be sitting at our offices or at home or on the beach. Instead, we choose to move our bodies to Austin in order to interact. Can you comment on this reluctance to fully use the technology, or why it's so important that we hang on to the way we used to do things?
Well, it is true that one of the 10 questions in that test is about the degree to which empathy is present in the job, and I think in that regard, we're probably here because we connect with people better. I would say that in those instances, the technology isn't perfect. And it's that little bit. So it's like virtual reality. If you haven't done it, when you put the goggles on and you start looking around, and it's really amazing. Like you just instantly, your brain just like buys it all. And yet it isn't completely perfect, so you never can really immerse yourself in it, or I can't, in a way that, like it doesn't smell the same, it doesn't smell like I'm there, and it doesn't. So I think whatever that gap is between the old experience and the new is the one we're willing to stick with the old one. See, but nobody pines away for like 19th century dentistry. You know, they don't say, I want my dentistry done the old way without Novocaine. I mean, there are some times that I mean, it's just absolutely universal because it is in every sense better. They will outlaw driving, though. That will just end. I mean, it will just be, I believe that it will be a bad idea. Well, thank you very much for having me. This was a lot of fun.